It has nearly been 4 years since the announcement of the Bazaar, since we saw the first Bazaar gameplay. Now, many things were promised, and there were many things baked into the very core of the game. Are they still the same now? The Bazaar gameplay preview. Indiegogo link below. Shall we? When was this? When is this from? This is from June the 4th, 2018. This is 3.5 years ago. 3.5 years ago. Let's dive in and see where we were 3.5 years ago, shall we? A little trip down memory lane. See where we've come from. See where I can give you the context of where we are. And yeah, point out what's changed. Maybe some promises that were broken. I don't know.
What's up, guys?
The old school music.
And we are in the last week of the Bazaar Indiegogo. How an average game might play out, and kind of what I had in mind for common decision trees and the things that you'd experience as a player. We're going to be showing you this with a very conceptual.
This is back when he was all thinking about the mechanical aspect of the game, right? Because Reynad had big experience in playing card games, very skilled player, could think very well about the intricacies of the mechanics of the game. So he was talking about different decision trees and stuff. That's where his mind was. It only took him, maybe 2 years to completely change up his mindset. And maybe Ben was a good influence on him with this, to start thinking about the bigger picture, start thinking about what his game can be rather than how his game should play.
Build of the game. This is not
maybe that was a little bit of that.
This is not alpha. This is not beta. The game will look nothing like this. This is just a...
The game will look nothing like this. He is not wrong.
Representation of the mechanics that we want to show you guys.
Oof, right. To be fair, at the absolute core of the game, there is still a field. There are still 2 players. There are still some items on each board. There's still gold. There's still a button for end turn, or it's kind of like next event, next encounter. But that's kind of where the similarities end. Oh no, there's a merchant tent just underneath Reynad. Those exist. Otherwise, just highbrow some of the things that we have lost over the years. The deck, obviously the discard pile, that kind of goes along with the deck. A hero power. An activatable hero power, I will say. That sideboard deck of monsters thing, and whatever this is in between them. Whatever this coin slot is, that's gone. We don't really have shielding in the same way that we did. Those are just highbrow things that we've lost. Looks like we still have a toy maybe, though.
So, first of all, this is my hand. I got some money.
What is that? Hover?
Get some...
oh god, yeah, the playable money. That's gone. It had this, like, Dominion thing. And it was heavily influenced by Dominion back then. For anyone who hasn't played Dominion... Actually, for anyone who hasn't played Dominion, go and play Dominion. It's on Board Game Arena, which is a website where you can play things for free. Go and play Dominion, it's good fun. And it heavily influenced the Bazaar, at least in the early days. So yeah, it's a game where you draw not only your items, but also your gold. So as you need gold, you have to be drawing it from your deck. So you can fill your deck with more gold or bigger quantities of gold on cards and stuff. Which I think was a theme at the beginning here. Yeah, I can see a card with extra gold there.
You get some money for the turn. I got some weapons, which are going to give me attack for the turn. And over here, we have the 2 circles that are going to represent those resources right now. So the crown circle. So
they kind of had hero stats at this point, I guess. I mean, these days we have strength and regen and armor, not shielding. Back then, they had attack damage and gold. I can't remember if they could split the attacks or what. We'll find out.
Representing how much money we have right now. Attack circle is going to represent how much attack we have right now. And over here, we have our potion, our hero trait. Every hero has a unique one. I get to use that whenever I want.
Not hero power.
So I'm going to make some potions. Over here in the center, we have one of the core mechanics in the game, which are your 4 main stores. So these
Oh, these were
ovals right now are gonna be
stores. These weren't the
representing where
cards
stores
that he
will be
had
in
on
the
his
game.
board.
This is where different
Of
monsters
course.
and items and spells show up. And
God, it's been so long since we played this. So at least we still had the stores, right? I remember now, I remember. These are his 4 different stores. So there's only one option in each one.
this is where I'm deciding what cards to interact with, what cards to add to my deck, to buy, what monsters to kill, etc.
This is so, like, you can see even at this point, Reyna hasn't fully utilized his own mantra of RNG, really, right? You have your 4 stores, but when this day rolled around, those 4 items just appeared. These stores haven't really given the player as much agency over the RNG as the stores in the new game, which is something very close to Reynard's heart, and something it looks like they kind of just avoided at this point. Like, you still have 4 options, but in the current day, you have a random selection of merchants, which you then have agency over, and then a random selection of items, which you have agency over again. You have more choices over the randomness.
So what I'm going to do is get rid of the more expensive cards, usually. But right now I don't have too many. I kind of like all 4 of these cards, to be honest. Let's see, Pyrology is going to draw a card for each card in my hand. That card's better late game, so I'm going to get rid of that one right there. Philosopher's Stone can constantly be reused to grow my deck economically. It's a very good card to buy early. And so are Enchanted Fireworks. Enchanted Fireworks don't grow my deck economically, but they keep putting firebolts into my deck to improve it. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of this Meditation Tome. I'm going to get rid of Playing with Fire. I'm going to keep these other cards. All right, so this is my first turn. So every single...
So, circling back to my thing a minute ago, where in the current Bazaar, you have a bunch of random merchants appear, then you choose which merchant to go to, and then a bunch of their random items will appear. In the first round of this old game, a bunch of random items would appear once, and then 4 times you would get to change what appeared, just to give you a good start. And then from there on, they've got to hope that their game is balanced, so that the RNG doesn't matter. But that's going to be a pain in the ass, and eventually just sort of didn't end up working out, as did a lot of things. You're not going to hit success with your first immediate design, that's for damn sure. That's one thing that the Bazaar has taught us all, I think. But yeah, this is just a standard mulligan. This was back when... And actually, I remember when I first jumped on making Bazaar content. I've been following the Bazaar since shortly after this. I just missed out on the Indiegogo, annoyingly. Way back here, when I first started making content for the Bazaar, they weren't this like massive innovative force. They were innovating on some things, and admittedly they weren't telling us everything they were doing, so they probably were. But there was a lot of stuff that we were saying that was like, this is very much like Dominion. This is very much like Hearthstone or Gwent, or like we could draw all of these comparisons in with the Bazaar as it was back then. Now, we struggle to compare it to an auto battler, which itself is the newest thing on the block, at least in terms of strategy.
Everybody's deck, right now in this conceptual build, starts with 12 cards.
And there's a lot of clicking that happens, as you will see.
10 of those are these coins.
Again,
that make
this is
one
a big
money,
change
and 2
they
of
went
them are these
through, trying
swords,
to
which give you 1
remove
attack,
the amount
and
of
they also
actions
draw a
needed
card
to have
replace
fun.
themselves. So by clicking...
Think about this game, right? Look how many times you have to click per round, right? You've got to click a button probably to start the turn, right, to draw your cards. You've got to click and drag each gold piece onto the board. You have to click each thing you want to buy. You then have to click each thing you want to play and where to play it. At least. And there's probably other stuff that we haven't seen yet, right? There'll be cards with effects that do extra stuff. Like boost an item, and then you have to click on another item. Most of the time in the Bazaar now, in the current day at least, you kind of just watch, right? The clicks are front-loaded. You have to make 1 choice per day, so it's kind of like 8 clicks per round, but the rounds are significantly longer than they were back here, and there's a lot of time in between each click, which I think is important. It's not necessarily clicks per round that is super important to me in a game like the Bazaar. It's more like clicks per minute, your APM, right? How many actions do I need to input for this game? If I want to play a high APM game, I'll go ahead and play Dota or something, right? I'll go play a MOBA. If I want to play a card game, it's probably because I want low APM. Maybe I'm just sat on my phone. Maybe I'm just chilling while half focusing on an edit or something. I obviously fully focused on my edits, but so like being able to nowadays click once for your decision or click once for your merchant, then click once for the item that you want to buy, and then think a bit more about the next thing that appears. Now, at the end of the day, there's no like, okay, I have to click like 5 times to make this attack work, and then I have to click this to attack this. I have to click this to activate this, to attack that, to do this. There's none of that. You just sit back, relax, and watch as the sandstorm wipes you away for the 3rd day in a row and your run's over.
And, well, I have a few options here. So I can pick up Pyromancer's Coin. Pyromancer's Coin is an interesting card. Every time I play it, I get 3 money instead of 1, so it's a very powerful coin.
And
the problem is it burns me every time.
Burns him every time.
It's a bad card in my deck that I don't want in there. A burn is a card that replaces itself by drawing a card, but it also does 1 damage to me. So the more of them I add to my deck, the more they start hurting me throughout a game. So it kind of hurts you to buy early, but at the same time, you want more money to work with.
I would like to see more of this in the Bazaar. Now, for the original 6, I am glad and I'm happy that they haven't done it. But I would like to see a bit more of this physical risk reward, right? Where you have items that hurt you in order to hurt the enemy. Maybe we see the vampire reappear and she has a lot of, or he or they or whatever, has a lot of cards that injure themselves in order to injure the enemy. This is something I appreciate actually from D&D 5th edition, where the base classes in the game were pretty simple. There are some that are a bit tricky. Sorcerer can be tricky for some people. No one ever knows how to do rogue sneak attack damage, even though it's realistically kind of simple. However, there were no classes in the base game that put you particularly at risk. The classes that had to go in had methods of getting out or methods of surviving, right? But then when they expanded on that, they put in the Blood Hunter. The Blood Hunter goes in, has very little way of getting out, and injures themselves to do damage. And that's why I made that connection to D&D 5th edition. Because I would love a character that deals damage by hurting themselves in the Bazaar. As the 7th or 8th class. Maybe even the 9th, right? You need that core group so people can learn the game and not like jump immediately into the thing that's going to kill them as they play. Oh, here's an interesting thought. I almost definitely know the answer. But when class number 7 and 8 come out, say they've been out for a while, say class number 10 comes out, right? People who play the game for the first time, are they going to still only have those 6 choices? Or are they going to be able to choose from 7 and 8 or maybe even 9? I assume they'll only get the base 6. I assume. But we'll see.
Alright, so going into turn 3, you can see my discard pile just shuffled back into my deck. So I'm going to be drawing 5 cards again. And this time my deck is going to include all these cards that I bought. So based on the decisions I made in the first couple turns, I have 2 very powerful cards in here to work with that are going to kind of help shape how the rest of my gameplay pans out. So because of my decision to buy Pyromancer's Coin, I'm going to buy Mystic Furnace to kind of offset that drawback so I can start cleansing the burns away. And that's really the idea behind this, right? It's not just about figuring out, okay, what's the best card in a vacuum? I'm going to buy that one every time. It's about taking into account what you've already picked up and have that influence your future buying decisions. And
that is interesting, because that is something that has stayed with us from the very beginning. Even to this day, one thing I guess Reynad was intent on making sure his game didn't fall into was being able to be net decked. He didn't want someone to just go onto Tempo Storm, download a deck, and play his game. He realized that combinations of cards, synergies of cards, were a much more fun way to deck build. So that's kind of how he set up his base game. And early days, there probably were some issues with just, okay, you just pick this if you see this, and you get this if you see this. You aim for this combo, right? But nowadays, he's stuck with it, and it's kind of working out. You can't really force a build in the Bazaar. You just have to pick up and play with what synergies you can build. And sure, it might not be the best deck ever, but you can almost certainly still get it to 10 wins. So it's really, really interesting and really cool to see that they had this sort of philosophy from the outset. That's one of the main things I love about this game. Yeah, it is absolutely huge.
More importantly than that, I want to be thinking about what my opponent's doing. So the vampire opponent this time around,
that, however, is gone.
Cut it out, but
kind of.
Sword. So my opponent's going for a more
small disclaimer.
Picked up a big weapon.
You do kind of have to be thinking about
I'm gonna
the general
meta. The types of cards.
There probably won't be a solid meta, but you will still be having to think about how other people are going to be playing. If absolutely no one is building Vanessa small item anymore because it's been nerfed to hell, then don't pick up the iceberg, maybe. That's probably a bad example. Don't pick up the flail, if the flail still does what it used to do, which was hit people with a lot of small items. Probably does something else now. But you get my drift, right? If there's things that are so far out of the meta, don't build against them specifically. And if there are things that are very much at the forefront of the meta, now we know we're going to be able to choose our opponents on the last day. If you know that big Pygmalion health builds are a thing and are big in the meta, and you see some items as you go through that will help you deal with that, whether it's a Sunderer to help with the Skyscraper, or whether it's percent health damage, right? Which will do drastically more than just regular hits. Pick those up, and then if you see that Pygmalion at the end of the day, you can choose them and go for them.
I want to add to my
so there's a little bit of it.
Pick up some defensive tools if I can.
But you're mostly building for yourself.
The vampire's aggressive game plan.
Like way back when, I was like, oh my god, a digital deck builder being built from the ground up. A specific deck builder for digital, I'm going to love this. And I was excited to see what happened. But knowing what we know now, looking back at this is slow. And I know I'm interrupting it a lot, but it's slow. And you're not really, like, I know it's not flashy either because they didn't put any polish into it just yet. But it really just doesn't go anywhere. There's a lot of drawing and playing coins and drawing more coins and playing more coins to buy an item. Like, he's like, what, 3 rounds in and he has like, or 3 whole turns in and he's got like 3 items. 3 turns into the Bazaar, you might already have a shiny item. You've at least got a hero skill and probably a good 3 or 4 items. If not a full board and you're unlocking new slots. Game just feels slow back then.
Deck better, and
they made a lot of improvements.
Big coin over here in order to, improve the amount of money that I can generate every turn on average, which helps me buy more stuff, improve my deck even more. Or
maybe I
have the choice of picking up this Blizzard card over here, which is going
to Blizzard?
Make it harder for my opponent to buy stuff. So I really have to decide, do I want to focus on my own game plan, or do I want to, do some counterplay and slow down what the vampire is trying to do. And this time I'm going to go for
that's such a negative,
so I'm going to pick up
happiness play.
Blizzard, and
he kind of just summed it up for himself, something that Ben made very apparent to us. When you get that Blizzard, you aren't necessarily happy about it. Some people will be, but most people aren't like, oh my god, this is so good for me. Like, this is a fun card to play. But that other person on the other side, they're like, oh, why did you do that? No, that's so annoying. Removing negative interaction was such a smart move. And whether or not Ben spearheaded it, he was the guy that explained it beautifully to us in the Zero Sum Fun video. I highly recommend people go and check that out if they haven't seen it yet. But you can see it in action here. Like, Reynad wasn't happy about picking that freeze. Like that Blizzard, he was like, eh. But it was that or buying a coin. That also wasn't fun.
All of his stores are going to get covered by Ice Wall. So in order to buy the cards under those, he's going to have to break those ice walls first by spending his attack on them. So, I have to make the decision as a player, is this an aggressive matchup? Can I afford to have a poison in my deck? How important is it for me to get those 2 weapons? At the same time, if I never buy the Viper, it's just all
2 classes ready since 2018. I know, right?
Covering up that store slot.
Think of how much they tore out of the game.
You know, maybe killing it just to see what's
between this point and now.
This is kind of a very common
those 2 classes
you have to make
entirely gone.
Has a benefit, but
some classes in between entirely gone.
All right,
systems
so
torn out.
The end of the mid game here,
and so much more stuff like tweaked and rebuilt.
We got 31 cards in there,
but effectively removed.
I've added a bunch of cards to my deck. My opponent's added a bunch of cards to my deck.
All of this art is gone now.
A shape of its own based on the decisions that I've made. And on my opponent to know what the best strategy is against that. Vice versa, based on what the vampire or my opponent this game was building, it influenced the decisions of what I was buying. So not only did I want to pick up cards that have good synergy together just within my own deck, but I wanted to react to what my opponent was building and doing to make their strategy less effective.
So, the Bazaar in 2018 had the same ideals as the Bazaar now. They wanted you to have to experiment with different builds every time. They wanted the game to feel different every time. Their methodology of reaching this is different, though. Back in 2018, they were forcing you into a 1v1 battle. You could still basically force any deck that you wanted to, but your opponent's decision-making would force you to think about it and maybe pivot into something different. That has slowly over time evolved and developed to be built in and baked into the system. So the core ideology is still the same. We want a unique strategy almost every game. But now the game itself makes you do that. It doesn't rely on the player to do it. They've made the game in such a brilliant way that you are either going to have to build something different every time or want to build something different every time. Because there are so many different options, so many different classes. There is a lot of RNG, but it's all RNG that you have agency over. I am shown 3 merchants. You know what? I could kind of do with a small item. I'll go to Andy. I open up Andy's shop. Okay, you don't show me the small item that I wanted, but you actually showed me a small item that I already have, and I can now make a shiny version of that. I guess my build is now about this different small shiny item rather than the one I was looking for. I guess I'll pivot into that. The Bazaar is going to be different every single game because of the game itself, not because of some arbitrary third factor like an opponent. You don't have to play their game. In 2018, you had to play their game. In 2020, you get to play your game. And that's kind of the key difference between the Bazaar back then and the Bazaar now. Promise is still intact. So if you think you like the look of the Bazaar now, or at least you like how it sounds, you should definitely go and check out this next video where I explain pretty much everything you need to explain.